Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria Q. Kane.
Hey everyone, welcome to Mother Knows Death. I'm here with Maria and we're going to get started with the story of the week.
Our featured story this week is about some new research that links owning cats to schizophrenia. Do you want to explain how this is even a thing?
Well, it explains a lot in my life, I guess. They're saying, so this is really nuts actually. So scientists in Australia looked at 17 different studies that have been published over the last 44 years over the span of 11 different countries. And they came up that there is an association between cat exposure and schizophrenia.
That's so wild. I never would have thought something like this. So what it's saying is worldwide, the illness is estimated to be found in about 1 of every 300 people. And it was first proposed in a 1995 study that there may be a connection between the two.
Yeah, so obviously everyone's first question is like, how the hell is that possible? Like, what does it having like a cute little fluffy cat have to do with schizophrenia, which is a mental illness that can cause symptoms such as paranoia and hearing voices, trouble thinking clearly, and this usually is diagnosed when a person is in their late teens or early 20s. So how could your cat cause that in you? And the biggest theory that they have right now is that it's linked to a parasite that cats carry called Toxoplasmosis gondii. And basically this, I think any woman that's ever been pregnant knows that this particular parasite could be a problem because it's present in cat poop. So they tell you not to change the litter box when you're pregnant because it could affect the unborn fetus. And they think that this same exact parasite could be the cause of the connection between the schizophrenia and having a cat. So it's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, and I was reading that they said the parasite's believed to enter through a cat's bite or contact, like you said, with feces or other like cat bodily fluids. But one thing I thought was really interesting, it said, was that it could also be exposed to humans by undercooked meat. Did they mean cat meat?
No, I think that it could be transmissible to other animals too. And they're just saying that, like, if even if a human's infected with it, then it could be transmitted through the meat because it would be like in your muscular tissue. Because some parasites just stay specific to like the GI system or something like that. But this means it gets into your skeletal muscle somehow. But I have a really good story to tell you about this, actually.
Okay.
So, like I said, when you're pregnant, you're not supposed to change the cat litter. I think, like, really, you probably shouldn't in general, even if you're wearing gloves, because cat litter creates a lot of dust, and it's something that you could inhale really easily too. So my friend Andrea, who's also a PA, was pregnant, and she had a cat and her husband was like changing the litter and everything. And she's a pathologist assistant like me. So she worked in the hospital and she did at the time the majority of the frozen section. So that's a specimen that comes down to the lab during surgery while a patient's still under. And we look at it under the microscope in pathology to determine the surgeon's next move. So we have we're supposed to have 20 minutes, takes like 20 minutes to a half hour. We process the specimen really fast. The pathologist looks at it under the microscope and calls the surgeon and says like, hey, you have cancer here or whatever. And whatever the pathologist tells the surgeon is what is going to guide the surgeon's next course of action, which is why it needs to be done right away. And Andrea at the time was doing a majority of the frozen sections in the lab. And she was 8 or 9 months pregnant, gets a brain frozen section. So the majority of those are cancer, to rule out some kind of cancer. She does it and she cuts it on this machine called a cryostat, which is the one that we freeze it on. And that's how we make microscope slides really fast. But when you do that, it creates the little flakes from the frozen material could kind of get up into the air. And she's doing this frozen section on this piece of brain tissue that we received. And they look at it under the microscope and the person had toxoplasm or toxoplasmosis is that's the condition when you have an infection with this parasite. It was in the brain tissue that she cut. So she had she had like a known exposure to it, and she was really pregnant. So of course she freaked out. It's also what's also is ironic about it is that she was like one of these over cautious people that always, she wore like an N95 mask anytime we got a lung specimen because we got so many that said they were cancer and they ended up being TB. But she just thought like, hey, I'm doing a brain tumor. So she didn't even have it on at the time. Like the one time she wasn't wearing it, right?
Is TB that common still?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it happens. We had several cases of it. So I actually was exposed to it while I was pregnant with Lucia. But so Andrea calls her GYN and says, I have a question. I was exposed to, like, gave her the whole entire story, and the OBGYN was just like, wow, I've never had anybody say that to me before, that they inhaled brain tissue from someone that had toxoplasm. So it was really like kind of a crazy time, but we had a lot of really good neuropathologists working with us at the time. That's pathologist that specializes in brain pathology, and they did a lot of research for her, and it looked like it wasn't going to be a problem. And I think she had the kid like a couple weeks later. She wasn't early into the pregnancy or anything, but I just thought that was an interesting tidbit to share some of the weird stuff that we have to go through working in pathology.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we're going to start with the celebrity news of this week. We have two different celebrities that are both young, that both have cancer. So do you want to get started with the first one?
Yeah, so did you ever watch Toddlers and Tiaras?
I think I did in the beginning because of that. The Honey Boo Boo kid was kind of so outrageous that you just watched it, and her mom wasn't there, just like she was really a feisty little kid, and they had kind of they were just like a really interesting family to watch. So I think when it first came out, I did see it.
Yeah, so that Toddlers and Tiaras is problematic for many reasons, but the young girl Honey Boo Boo got her own spin-off show with her family. So unfortunately, her 29-year-old sister, which that's how old I am, so this is really disturbing for me to hear. Earlier this year, she was diagnosed with stage 4 adrenal carcinoma, and she has just passed away. So it's really sad. She's leaving behind 2 young kids, a husband. She's survived by a couple of sisters. Her mom was posting all about it. It's really sad to see.
It's really shocking for me to hear too, because I saw this a few times in my career, maybe 1 or 2 times in surgical pathology, because adrenal cancer is so rare. It only happens in like 1 in a million people. So it's really rare. And what's even more rare is that, so there's pretty much the most common kinds of adrenal cancers, or 2 most common ones. One of them is the adrenal cortical carcinoma, and that it arises in the cortex of the adrenal gland. And that would be the most common one that you would probably see in an adult, but it's usually in adults that are older, and like older than 50 years old. And if it does happen in kids, it would be like under 10 years old. So her being in her late 20s is just like, she doesn't really fit in that demographic. At the same time, though, you don't ever want to say that, because anything's possible. But from a doctor's perspective, you always want to know like what the most common demographics are, because that helps you kind of identify if a patient's having a problem. So the other one is called a neuroblastoma, and that one's most common. Like, I think 98% of them occur in kids that are under 5 or 6 years old. So again, super, super rare for even anyone over 10 years old to get that one. So this gap in between like 10 years old and 50 years old, there's not really many people who get adrenal cancer. And she presented about a year ago, I guess it was like a year and a couple months ago, she started having back pain. She went and got checked out. They said that she had a cyst removed, and I don't know where the cyst was removed from or whatever. But then over the course of the next couple months, she wasn't getting any better. She started losing hair and having more pain in her back and stuff. And then finally, when she was diagnosed, it was considered stage 4, which means it was spread throughout her body. I think they said it was in her lungs at least. But so what the course of action was, because it is so aggressive, they decided that they were going to give her chemo, and she did chemo for a couple months and said that she was getting better like around May of this year. And then 2 months later, they announced it's terminal. So when they say that, it's when oncologists don't think that there's really anything more that they can do, and no matter what additional treatment they give, they're not going to be able to make this tumor shrink and go away. So they just try to do as best as possible to make you comfortable until you die.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely really sad to hear, because watching the show a little bit, you can tell their family's really close, and the fact that she was a young mother of 2 kids that are never really going to know her, and it's just really sad all around.
Yeah. And so the next case is also sad. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah, so Kate Micucci, who was a actress most notably on Big Bang Theory, she's like one of those actresses that's on a lot of movies and shows that you definitely recognize her face, but she's never usually the main player. I think she's a really cute girl, but she's in her early 40s, and she just posted a TikTok over the weekend that she just had surgery done on her lungs for cancer, which is kind of crazy. And she was talking about how she had never smoked in her life, so she didn't really understand how it happened. But can you explain for everybody the different types of ways you could get lung cancer if you've never smoked?
So there's a lot of things about lung cancer that people don't really realize. And if I said to you, Maria, right now, like, what's the number one cancer that women die from, what would you say?
Breast cancer.
No, it's lung cancer, actually.
Okay.
So women do get more breast cancer. That's, well, actually, between men and women, the most common cancer is skin cancer. For women, the next one is breast, and for men, the next one's prostate. But more women die, and then the following one after that, third, is lung cancer in both men and women. But the reason that I say that is because even though more women get breast cancer, more women die from lung cancer. So, and all of those women aren't smokers, and people just automatically associate lung cancer and smoking. But the reason that you get lung cancer from smoking is because you have, number one, I personally think you have this genetic component, and then you have this environmental assault, being the cigarettes. And that causes, those two together cause a change in DNA, which then could lead to cancer, precancerous cells, and then cancer. That's why you see certain people who smoke until they're 90 years old, that George Burns dudes or whatever, like they smoke their whole life and they never get cancer, because it has to be like 1 + 1 = 2 kind of thing. So there's all different kinds of cancers that you can get in your lung, but the one called a carcinoid you could get, I actually just wrote about this on a mystery diagnosis a few weeks ago. That one is not necessarily caused by an exposure, but just a typical regular lung cancer, like an adenocarcinoma of the lung, could be caused by so many different exposures that they think that up to 26% of exposure of lung cancer is due to radon exposure, which is like a radiated type of gas that like emits from rocks and stuff in the dirt. So that's why when you buy a house, they go in your basement and they want to do radon testing to make sure, because you wouldn't see those gases in your house, but they think a large number of lung cancer is because of that. And also, just for example, like me working in the lab and breathing in formaldehyde, that's a known carcinogen. It's all different things that could cause this. You could be breathing in, working in a mine, or just working anywhere that with chemical exposures. Gabe, especially, it's very common in firefighters because they breathe in these burning materials, the 9/11 firefighters and stuff like that. So the fact that she hasn't had a cigarette and she has cancer doesn't surprise me, but it just happens. I just think that people don't realize how much it happens, but I've seen it multiple times throughout my career.
Well, It looks like in her case they caught it pretty early, so hopefully they'll be able to do the necessary treatment so that she can kind of get through it and get better.
Yeah, I think she's going to be fine as long as she stays on top of it and stuff. I think that they said that she was diagnosed as a stage 1. So what they'll do is they'll go in and they'll take out. I would think they were going to take out the entire lobe of her lung, but you have multiple lobes of your lung. You could actually live without an entire lung. So she may have like little short-term problems, but hopefully this is like something she just gets surgery for and moves on from it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get into freak accidents.
So the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, say that 5 times fast, they're warning about certain toys because Christmas is right around the corner. It's only 11 days away, so we're going to go through a list of some of the most dangerous toys. We actually just did a really good high-profile dissection about this in the gross room, and it gives some really good intricate details about some of these cases. But first we have water beads, which they're these little beads that are sold as like a sensory toy, and once they're filled with liquid, which if they get in the body, they fill with liquid, they could grow to the size of a tennis ball. So these things are little marbles essentially, and they could get as large as a tennis ball. So they're saying these are really dangerous because they look like candy and it makes little kids want to eat them. And then it can cause all these complications, including bowel obstructions and other things.
I think with every single thing that we're going to talk about on this list today, it's like what the toys itself were pretty much intended for are not really the problem, but we actually talk about a case in the post that we did, right, of the water beads. This happened last year, that this mom had bought these water beads for her child that was autistic, that was, I think he was like 8 or something, but somehow her 9-month-old baby put these water beads in its mouth, and some of them range in size from a little tiny ball like the size of a pen all the way up until a marble or something. So let's say this 9-month-old baby, like maybe if they put a bigger one in their mouth that was the size of the marble, they would just choke on it right away. But the smaller ones that are just the size of like sprinkles that you would put on cookies or something, if you swallow that and then inside the intestine it gets fluid in it, and then it starts to get large, it gets so large that it fits the entire opening of the bowel, and it gets stuck, and it could cause it causes a bowel obstruction. It could cause a perforation, which means that the bowel kind of explodes, and that means that all the poop that was in the bowel goes inside the sterile abdomen, which could lead to a serious infection, if not sepsis, and then if not death. So that's, and then we have a discussion underneath of the post that we do in the gross room, and it's like, well, number one, why the hell does a 9-month-old baby have access to this? It says right on the thing it's a choking hazard, and you know, I agree with that this isn't really the company's fault, but at the same time, like, you have to take into consideration that people aren't going to be using it. I mean, mistakes just happen all the time, and the reason that they put these warnings out is because multiple ERs are reporting these accidents. So it's not just like some freak thing that happened. It happens all the time. And do you want to go over some of the other things on the list, Ray?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump really quick because we kind of have like a sub-story to this specific one. So I feel like this is the best time to talk about it, where Target, Amazon, and Walmart have announced they're going to stop carrying these water beads. But because of so much public outcry about how dangerous they are, I did notice Target said they were going to not sell them to kids under 12. But how are you possibly monitoring that? Any parent could buy them at all, when Walmart and Amazon are going to try to go for a total ban of them.
They're just doing that to cover their ass. The thing is, though, is that if you bought those, like, for Christmas this year for my kids, this wouldn't be a problem because there's no babies in this house. These kids don't put stuff in their mouth anymore. And like these things, that's what I'm saying. Like the toy itself, if you follow the directions and read it, it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous. It's just kind of like, which makes me kind of annoyed that they have to be like, oh, well, parents are so checked out right now and they're playing on their phone and like other kids could get into it and choke. So they're going to sue us and we don't want to be responsible kind of thing. I don't know. It's just, it's not intended. It's the same thing as when you were a little kid, right? You used to play with those Polly Pocket things. Remember, there were like two different sizes. There were the really little ones, and then there were like the ones that were a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and then the bigger ones had like rubber clothes and shoes and stuff.
But the little ones were choking hazard for a child. It's the same thing. Like if you're a kid that's 6 years old playing with Polly Pockets and you leave them on the floor and a 1-year-old crawls by and picks it up and puts it in their mouth, it's an accident, but it's not like Polly Pocket's fault. That toy was designed for a 6-year-old, not a 1-year-old, you know?
I just, like, I get that, but I think with this specific product, it's kind of hard because you can't make, like, a Polly Pocket doesn't look like candy, right? Like, these things look like candy, and I think for a really little kid, it could be very confusing for them. So, you know, as parents, like, it doesn't even have to be, like, you're checked out. You could literally turn your head for 2 seconds, and then a kid could pop one in their mouth, so... We shouldn't really be making toys look like other ingestibles if they could potentially cause so much harm.
Yeah, but if it says on the package that it's a choking hazard for kids under 4 years old, what responsibility the parents have to not have it where it could, the same thing could be said about weed gummies. Like there's a responsibility of the adult to not have their child have access to that shit.
Well, I don't really agree with you with that because if you had weed gummies, you, I would hope, would try your best to hide them from kids, whereas the water beads are intended to be played with by a child. So even if you were giving them to the correct age group, if there's other children in the house or you aren't paying attention for 2 seconds, something could go awry. So I'm with the stores.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm with them. Like, let's take some personal responsibility when we're doing stuff. I understand accidents happen, and I'm not saying that these parents are bad at all, because listen, like I'm the first one to say that one time I left a curling iron plugged in the bathroom, and one of the, I think it was Lucia, touched it when it was on, and I felt terrible about it. There's accidents that happen all the time
but a curling iron is not intended to be played with a child. Like that's the point I'm trying to make, is like this is designed for a child. Like weed gummies and a curling iron are not intended to be for children.
Yeah, but it says it's designed for a kid that's over 4 years old. So why is a 9-month-old touching it? It's not designed for them.
I get that, but if you're in a playroom and there's younger siblings, I think there's more mishaps. But anyway, we could go on about this all day. Let's agree to disagree on this. The next category is any toys with button or coin batteries.
Yes.
So this is also a topic we've covered.
Yeah, so a lot of these things, even, you know, the kids are really into these lights that you hang up in your bedroom, and they have these remote controls that you could change the color of the lights. And those remote controls, same thing, like if a little baby is just playing with this remote and puts it in their mouth and the battery pops out, the batteries are so small, they're like the size of a button, so they could swallow them. They usually won't be they could be a choking hazard depending on how big the button is and how small the child is. But the more concern is when it gets into the stomach, and then the stomach acids start trying to digest the battery, and all of a sudden it causes an erosion in the stomach, and then which can lead to a perforation, again, sepsis, death. It's another common thing that they're seeing in emergency rooms. All right, what
next we have toys with magnets. So this was confusing for me. So they ban these certain like magnetic, they're like little balls or like squares that connect together to form a chain. So they were the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned these in 2014 and then unbanned them in 2016, and now their new research is showing that they're again dangerous. So I'm like, well, what happened between the ban and then the unban?
It was some court ruling, I think it was in Colorado or something, that said that they couldn't ban them. Again, these actually have a very interesting pathology, because when children swallow these things and they're little silver balls, like Maria was saying. They're the size of like a BB or something. But they come in different sizes too. But what happens is that they're like these extra crazy magnetic magnets, and when a couple of them are swallowed together, they make the segments of the bowel like actually stick together because it could go through the bowel wall. That's how strong they are, and it causes a pseudo effect that you would see in a person that had like surgical adhesions or something that was causing their bowel to be kind of kinked up and not let the poop flow through correctly. And again, that could lead to perforations, sepsis, death, and and we could kind of jump down to the bottom of the list where we're talking about knockoffs, because a lot of these problems occur from websites like Amazon that they're selling products that are from other countries. They're not going through the same standards as ours. They can't be checked. I just saw that there was a recall for, I mean, this is kind of side note, but on Amazon, I saw there was a recall for bumpers because babies were dying from these bumpers that have been banned in the United States, but somehow they were listed on Amazon and someone bought them and then the kid died. So this, you have to think about that too with Amazon. Like, just because you can purchase something on Amazon doesn't mean that it's safe for your kid, because the safety, there's no one checking that stuff. It's even with certain like makeup and stuff. I'm like very wary of buying makeup that's not from name brands, because you get scared about your kids putting that on their face, you know?
Yeah, and just to wrap up this list, like the other ones I feel like are pretty obvious dangers, like hoverboards, trampolines, toys with loose and small parts. Of course, those are problematic.
Well, so when we wrote this up, Maria had found that the most common injuries, now we're not talking about deaths from toys, but the most common injuries from toys were from these like scooters, hoverboards, skateboard things, broken.
Well, it's not just the electronic ones either. It's also the non-motorized classic scooters. Kids just like go crazy on them and break their bones constantly. They are the number 1 ER visit related to toys every year, is these scooters.
If you guys want to check out that post in the gross room, it's kind of like a fun but not fun post. We like to try to do things that are themed for the holidays, but one of the fun parts of the post is the history of some of these toys that we were going back to like the 1950s, which was there was a kit that you can have, it was like a radioactive science kit for kids, and they had real uranium in it for children to play with. And slip and slide, what were those, the ones you had when you were a kid?
Oh,
Heelys. So it's an interesting article, and of course we show pictures and stuff of what some of these surgeries look like after the kids have problems with these toys.
The uranium's pretty crazy to me, because we actually have a story local to us where, you know, at those antique stores they sell those uranium plates that are under like the black light and you can see them glow, and a kid got one at a local antique shop and brought it to one of our local high schools, and they shut the whole high school down.
It was ridiculous. It was like a hazmat situation, and I'm like, wait, it was for uranium glass? That's ridiculous. Okay, another Christmas related story has to do with Santa Claus getting, or Mrs. Claus getting 3rd-degree burns. You want to talk about that?
Well, I actually think it was the friend of Mrs. Claus that got
okay.
But this story happened in Plymouth, Michigan. It's like really horrible, actually. There was at this Northridge church, there was an annual Christmas performance that it said it draws around 32,000 people between 2 weekends to view this spectacular. It's something, you know, like I just saw Mariah Carey's Christmas show last night, and I think it just would be a nice event to go to. So this is especially unfortunate that this happened. But this woman, she was in a costume, and she came into contact with a candle that was accidentally left on the stage from a previous, I guess, song or little number they did. And her entire thing went up in flames. She has 3rd-degree burns. She's going to be in the hospital for a couple weeks getting treated. It's really horrible.
Okay, can I ask the obvious question?
What?
Why would you ever be using a real candle when they sell candles that look like they're on fire? Like, I just, it just doesn't even make any sense to me.
I agree with you there. It definitely, like, this is under the freak accident category because obviously, like, I've been in band and choir and I know that they do these things, and all I see is probably they had a bunch of singers holding real candles and somebody put one down not thinking about it, and then a tragedy like this happens. So I agree with you. They certainly should not be using real candles when they make such good fake candles,
Yeah.
and they're not that expensive. So it's not even like a cost thing.
Yeah, and like those costumes that you use for stage productions are like pieces of shit. They're like they blow they're like a fire waiting to happen, right? They're all like polyester and just like totally inorganic materials covered in chemicals. It was probably like that red sparkly stuff and everything, and the fake fur and all. And I mean, this is no joke. This woman has third-degree burns, which is a full thickness burn through all of the layers of your skin and the subcutaneous tissue. Like
on 30% of
yes,
her body.
she's going to need skin graft, and she's going to have lifelong complications. I mean, she's at a high likelihood of not even surviving this, because when you get burns on that much of your body that bad, you're at an increased risk for infection. Your skin controls your temperature regulation. People don't realize that your skin is an organ, and it's your most important organ that keeps all of the bad stuff out of your body. And I mean, she's gonna deal with this the rest of her life. It's like no joke. And
and she's your age. She's very young.
Well, thanks. I like that in the article. They're like, they paused the show, and I'm like, they paused the show. they continued it after that.
We have a lot of stories coming up where there's very questionable choices like that. And then the woman that received the burns was telling her pastor that she was most bummed out that she was missing the show. I'm like, you're not bummed out that you have a life-altering injury?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know.
I feel horrible for her, especially something that was supposed to be like a fun, festive activity.
Yeah, I mean, I feel horrible for like little Johnny sitting in the audience that watched this lady like burning and security smothering her to try to get the fire out. Like I can't.
I didn't even tell you this. Last night when we were getting up to leave the show, some girl in the row in front of us launched like 2 rows down. I don't even know what happened. She was so drunk and she smacked her head so hard on the seat and people in front of her, and I got that gut-wrenching like, oh my god, because she was flying through the air. It was so dramatic, but I was like, if she goes over that railing, I'm going to throw up. Like,
yeah, I always feel
I can't imagine seeing stuff like this in person. I always feel like the stadium
is like so steep. I always feel like I'm gonna fall down. Okay, so in Pakistan, these zoo cleaners, they were cleaning out the zoo, and they look over at one of the big cats and they see a shoe in the big cat's mouth. And they quote, thought that was suspicious. Really? And they ended up going in and they found the guy in the enclosure that looked like he was ripped apart, and that was his cause of death. And it did look like he had some defensive wounds. But really, the best part of the story is that it says, quote, our assessment so far is that this appears to be a lunatic.
Oh yeah, I had that. They said a quote, lunatic was believed to go into the den because no right person in their right mind would just enter a den. It's unclear if it was a tiger or a leopard too. It seemed like whoever was writing the article had like some translation mishap with the government official from Pakistan, but this is definitely a wild story. I can't imagine just seeing a shoe and being like, something doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah.
And then
like
where else did something's not quite right?
Where else did the big cat get a shoe? All right.
Didn't we have a situation at our zoo where the kimono dragon like ate somebody?
I don't think that was our zoo. Wasn't that like something to do with Sharon Stone?
No.
There's like
there
a Sharon
kimono.
There's definitely a Sharon Stone kimono dragon thing. I don't know if she had one as a pet or something and it like ate her boyfriend. I don't know. We need to look that up.
What? I just listened to a really good interview
I'm serious.
with her last
I think
week
so.
actually. I'm going to have to look this up. I listened to a really great interview with her last week, and it made me just want to look up a bunch of stuff about her life.
Search her name in kimono dragon. I swear to God, like I could be totally wrong, but something's triggering me to think that. All right, this is, as a parent, this is, we always have these as a parent. This is a horrible story, but There was an accidental fentanyl exposure at a school, and Ree, do you want to get into telling everyone what happened?
So this fourth grader brought in a bag of gummy bears, and 7 kids ate the gummy bears and then all started presenting symptoms of nausea, diarrhea. They were all lethargic. So they had to be taken, a couple of them, only 5 of them, had to be taken to the hospital. But when they tested the bag, it seemed like that there was fentanyl in the bag, not in the gummy bears itself. And the weirdest part is that another kid from the home brought the same exact bag of gummy bears to his class as well, and there was no traces of it at all. And 2 people have been arrested in connection of this case, but they're not really saying like how the people are connected to the child at all. It's not clear if it's a relative or something nefarious happened. So it's just a really weird story.
And these kids are, could you imagine, like, this is just like, thanks, another thing I didn't think about when my kids are in school today, because they have these rules at all the schools. I know I've talked to my friends too that like the kids shouldn't be sharing each other's food, but like I swear to God, every single day when I empty my kids' lunchbox out, they have wrappers and stuff that I'm like, that's definitely, I didn't send that with them. This is what kids do. They're like, hey, you want to trade me for this? You want to trade me for that? And there's really, I just feel like there's no way to really monitor it, right? And I
Yeah.
personally don't care. I'm like, as long as my kids are eating, I don't care. But now you're thinking like, what if some kid in your class is giving your kid gummy bears? This is a 4th grade class. They eat them, of course, because it's candy. And then all of a sudden you're getting a call that your kid's been exposed to fentanyl. Like, what?
Yeah, and the investigators are really unsure if the bag was tampered with in the home, or they said that the kids were brought to school by their caregiver. I don't know what that means, whether it was a nanny or a neighbor helping or a family member, but they're not sure when the bag got altered. And it was especially weird that another kid in the house brought the same exact setup and didn't have any issue. So this is definitely really bizarre.
This episode today is being brought to you by Stink Bomb. Every week on Mother Knows Death, we do questions that are from the audience, and we post them on the Instagram account, so just make sure that you check that out, and you could ask us any questions, and we'll answer some of them. Obviously, we can't answer all of them, but one of the questions this week was, how do I deal with all of the smells working in the morgue? And I would like to add surgical pathology as well, because that could be really stinky, and in fact, every single aspect of the hospital could be stinky, no matter what department you're working in, because humans smell. You know, you've smelled sometimes. My husband smells all the time, but
He really smells all
yeah,
the
he
time.
does. But it's just, I love it. It's his scent, and I love it. But
I can't agree.
well, anyway, at the hospital, of course, I definitely don't want to be smelling like gangrene, and poop's a big thing in the autopsy, especially because, you know, especially if you don't know you're going to die, your whole colon could be full of multiple days worth of poop, and it smells really horrible. So on top of wearing a mask to kind of let that smell go away a little bit, the best thing to really make it a more pleasant experience is to use some stink bomb, because you could put it right underneath your nose, put your mask on, and all you smell is, I mean, my favorite fragrance right now at this time of year is the evergreen, because it smells like Christmas, and it just gives you a little bit of Christmas cheer in your day.
Yeah, and I like switching them out throughout the year. So there's lavender, coffee, pumpkin spice, evergreen, and many more different scents. So you could use code MKD15 at stinkbombodorblocker.com for 15% off all products.
Thanks, Stink Bomb. All right, now we're going to get started with violent crimes.
Did you send this story to Michelle?
The next one?
No, this first story in violent crimes. I'm pretty sure that's where her son goes to college.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, so Michelle.
Okay, Michelle, so we definitely need to talk about this after you listen to it, but we'll let you listen to this story first. So,
well, explain who Michelle is, because people might not know who she is.
Oh, sorry. Michelle is our wonderful family friend. We love her so much. She's a guest writer in the Gross Room. She's our producer extraordinaire. She's incredible. We love to have her in our life, so I'm really excited for her.
She's gonna like this. So, a couple that is scientists at the University of Florida have just been arrested for locking their kids in cages.
Yeah, this story is absolutely horrible. So this little boy went to school and told his teacher he did not want to go home because his parents were locking him in a cage. So then the teacher calls the police, and they were accompanied by a social worker and go into the house, to which they find two cages. One was from a wooden crate, I believe, and then the second one was from an old crib. So these parents were locking their 6-year-old and their 2-year-old in these cages, and the mother didn't even deny it. She explained about the 6-year-old that his behavior was so bad and no daycare would take him, and she didn't know how to control him, so she put him in there, but only for a couple hours. What's the big deal? They would let him out after work.
Like, that's the scariest part, is that she didn't think anything was wrong with this. Like, I guess she was working from home or something and couldn't put the kid in daycare, and she had to get work done. But
yeah,
I mean, you know what I would be a really interesting show, actually, is if we could somehow talk to teachers and just say, like, what are some outrageous things that you've heard from kids that are totally off the wall like this? Like, imagine, because 6th grade, the kid's what, in first grade, and the kid goes up to his teacher and says that. Like, how do you even respond to that if you're just like a regular person hearing something like that?
Also, how do you decipher from truth and fiction? Because kids like say a lot of stuff, but I guess you have to look into it because you don't know. And this situation came true. So then the 2-year-old, they found that the 6-year-old explained to the officers that the parents would put his 2-year-old little brother in this upside down old crib in their bedroom closet. And there was a mattress turned upside down with all these springs popping out of it. So extremely dangerous to a toddler and not right. So these people have been arrested. And what I was saying earlier about questionable choices is that they're only on like leave of absence from their job or something.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you be fired immediately?
I don't know how it works. I mean, obviously, like, their attorney is saying that the use of cages is grossly misrepresented. And I don't know because I guess if they wrongfully fire them without them having really been convicted of a crime yet, then maybe they can get in trouble for that too. I don't know how it works. It's just, what's alarming to me is, like, listen, like, I've worked with scientists my entire life, and along with myself, almost every scientist I know is like weird, right? But not in a like lock your kids in cages kind of way, just in like a Star Trek kind of way. I don't know. It's just it's alarming to me because I think, okay, these people are scientists, they're educated, they know that this isn't right. So what's going on there, that they did it with 2 different children? And it's always more alarming when 2 parents, like 2 adults, 2 educated people are doing something together. It's because there's not one being like, this isn't right, we shouldn't do this, talking sense into the other one. That's perfect example of like 2 people that should never have gotten together in this world.
No, it's disgusting. And the mother's pleading not guilty. I'm not sure where the father stands on it, but she really doesn't think she's done anything wrong by it at all. And I think there could be an argument of like a homemade contraption versus a playpen type of deal, but like, no.
There can't. Yeah, like
like, she can't justify this at all. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I see, like, putting a gate over the steps because you don't want the kid to like fall down the steps, but it's not even cool if you have a huge bedroom to shut the door and lock the kid in the room. Like, it's just,
you can't trap a child under a crib that's turned upside down. Like, in no world is this correct.
No, it's not. All right, this next case is it happened at the shore we go to multiple times a year in the summer in New Jersey, in Ocean City, New Jersey. Ray, you want to tell them a little bit about what happened?
When I opened this in our document the other day, it was right before I went to bed, and I read the first sentence and was like, this is not good to go to bed to. So this happened in Ocean City, New Jersey, which is in Cape May County. So this 46-year-old male called 911 and said that he had killed his mother, and it seems like there was a history of severe mental illness going on with this person. So they get to his apartment in Ocean City and find him naked, covered in blood, over the headless dead body of his mother.
Yeah, so when first responders came, that's what they walked into, and in a beautiful shore town. I'm sure it was very unexpected for them to see that. They looked at security footage and saw that the woman's head was thrown out of the apartment into the hallway, and then he kind of like peeked through later and then ended up pulling his mother's dead body into the hallway, and I guess that's when he decided to call 911.
The visuals of this are so disturbing, like it makes me sick to even think about.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm sure they so rarely see crimes of this caliber down there. So this is an horrible one.
can't. It's pretty chill down there, and they don't. I mean, they have. I'm sure they have their share of things happening, but this was probably like a nice little shock right before the holidays.
Imagine living in the apartment building and just like leaving your house to go out and like stumbling.
It actually says exactly
scene.
where it happened, so I'm trying to visualize it because it's right in the heart of town. So it's nuts.
Really sad.
At least it's not on season, so there's not really a lot of people down there right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
But this next story is about this guy that was impaled with a golf club. So do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, this guy is a former ballet dancer, and he is working at a grocery store as a clerk. And first responders found him with a golf club impaled through his torso.
So they've arrested a 44-year-old suspect, and it was a 6-hour standoff at a nearby apartment. So this is just a really bizarre situation. I'm thinking of getting impaled with a golf club. Don't you feel like it'd be a little hard to get through somebody?
Yes, I do, but it depends. Just because it depends what the shape of the end of it was, but no, I mean it just depends on what the shape of it. It's a long metal stick, and if you push it hard enough through somebody, you can do it. And we see, I've seen injuries a few times reported of people getting beat up with golf clubs, never stabbed with one and stuck through their body and killed them. They were saying that there was a significant amount of blood at the scene, so I'm assuming that the golf club nicked the aorta or a major branch coming off of it, and he bled to death right then and there. But how freaking tragic.
It is, definitely.
Okay, so another disturbing story involving a nurse/hospital worker that is just doing the most unconscionable things to patients. Do you want to talk about this guy?
Christopher Lambros was just sentenced to 22 years in prison for sexually assaulting multiple female patients that were unconscious in the ICU. So this story is so incredibly disturbing. In July of 2022, an employee had walked in to the room and had found him, I'm assuming, performing oral sex of some type on an unconscious woman by the way the scene was described, and trying to take a selfie of him doing it with her exposed genitals and breasts. And then he was questioned, and he said that it was a misunderstanding. It's always like a misunderstanding. What's the misunderstanding?
He said he had a misunderstanding with a coworker, meaning like I think he was saying like he was having problems with a coworker, and she was trying to make it seem like more than what it really was. That's how I read it.
So investigators took his phone and found, of course, thousands of pictures of him just assaulting women. He was just taking videos and pictures of him just doing horrible things to these unconscious women. Most of them were around your age and older, and they believe they identified 13 different victims between all of his photos, but they've only been able to identify 5 of them.
Yeah, and on the videos, he was saying like really disturbing stuff about how this was part of his Dexter collection. And he was also on there saying, don't ever get rid of these videos. Like, what a freaking weirdo.
Yeah, he is weird. And so all these pictures are dated between 2021 and 2022, but they're thinking based on other information they've received that this has been happening since 2016. So if they've found 13 victims between a 1-year period, then like how many more are there?
I don't know, but like again, really cool that your family member is sick and dying in the ICU, and some mega creepster perv is giving oral sex to her, and then think about getting a phone call that this happened. This is what you have to deal with. Like it's so messed up.
Yeah, and it's what we've talked about the last 2 weeks with these disgusting perverts that are just like doing necrophilia and everything, because, you know, three of these victims that have been identified have deceased since these pictures were taken, and it's like now they have to notify the families. What closure can you ever get knowing that your loved one was violated in such a horrible way? And how, as the other women, how are you living knowing you were in such a vulnerable state and supposed to be in the care of trusted employees only to be violated when you were knocked out? It's not right.
Is like porn and hand jobs like old fashioned now? Is the new thing like let's like have sex with severely unconscious people or dead people? What's going on with that?
I mean, I think this is a fetish that's been happening for hundreds of years, but just with social media and everything, we're just hearing about it a lot more. So I don't really know. And now, you know, the internet's designed to give you your niche kinks, right? So everybody's able to look up exactly the content they want. And I think it's something we've discussed in past interviews with like Dr. Shaham Das we had in the grocery room a couple months ago, that these things build. Like people might look these things up on like the quote unquote dark web and everything, and then it escalates to them doing it in person, and it just keeps escalating and escalating because once their fetish is fueled, it just starts getting to a point where it's never enough. So you have to go to like the next extreme, which was the case with Jeffrey Dahmer, you know?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't wrap my head around it. And I'd actually would like to talk to other nurses that worked with him, because I doubt that he was completely normal and this was like the one weird thing that he did. I'm sure he was like way off, and it probably, you always work with a person that you're like, like they're a little like they're not normal, and I'm curious about that.
And this is another case where he was suspended, which I understand that he has to be proven guilty, but like, come on.
Unreal. Okay, this case happened right near my mom's house, actually. There was a 6-year-old kid came home from school and said that they were visibly upset, and said that the school bus aide tried to strangle them. And they called the police, obviously. And at the same time, the bus driver that was driving around the assistant and the child, I guess they contacted police as well and said that they had seen something like this, and they looked at the surveillance film, and sure enough, it looked like this assistant bus driver was strangling this kid for about 7 seconds after he was trying to get his seatbelt on.
Yeah, so the driver had seen the act happening, and immediately when returning to the bus terminal had reported the incident to his superiors. And then when the kid got home, he had marks on him and everything, and then they checked the surveillance footage on the bus and saw exactly what happened. And the guy that was, he was in his a 72-year-old aide on the bus was the guy that did it, and he voluntarily turned himself in. But how absolutely disgusting.
Well, this went okay, because the kid could have passed out. I mean, within 5 seconds of closing off the carotid artery, you can pass out, and he could have caused a serious brain injury to this kid, if not death. And that's what's a lot of these stories are, that, when your children leave you, you're trusting other adults to take care of them, and this kind of stuff happens because there's always, and you don't know the situation, like the guy could have had a really bad day and just broke up with his wife or something and was just flipped the switch. He could have been fine all the time. It's just like you never, and not justifying that at all, but I'm just saying, like, you don't ever know what's going on in people's lives. And sometimes people, like with the story we just talked about, a person's a nurse and is doing stuff like this. They're there to help, and they're actually hurting. This guy's there to help and he's hurting. Like, it happens. It's just so scary, especially if it happens to your kid.
Yeah, and I can't imagine, like, I've obviously, because I'm human, had times in my life where I've gotten really angry at a person, but I've never felt the urge to, like, harm them. It's just this really insane thing to hurt a child, like such a little kid. Like, what are they possibly doing that warrants choking them?
I don't know. All right, this next story is probably up there with one of my favorites of the week. There was
my God.
There was a cop, and he was at a sex store with his wife, and they were in line, And then he started talking about how the wife didn't need fake penises to put him to shame, and they were having an argument, and he looked like he was going to slap his wife when the clerk stepped in and tried to get them to stop fighting, and the cop ended up like giving the guy a beat down in the dildo store.
Yeah, he like beat the shit out of the clerk, and then like classic temper tantrum, like threw merch all over the
I'm
place.
like,
and then
so he was throwing dildos at the guy, basically.
yeah, like I can't even imagine responding to this scene. So it's like he like beats the shit out of this guy because his wife clearly wants something better, an electronic, and then they speed away, and he gets pulled over, and they get the call at the same time. So they were like, "All right, like." We know you did this.
Yeah, so. They pulled him over for speeding, and then the call came in that he beat down this sex toy shop worker, and that's when he get in trouble. But the best part of the story, though, is that TMZ had said that there was no word if his wife got the toy that she wanted. Pull through, Santa.
Dude, like, most people don't realize that TMZ is actually a really like credible news source, but when you read these articles, you're like, what goes on in these people's minds? They're just written so insane. Like the headlines, like, do you ever see ones that there was a story we cut this week about Amanda Bynes getting eyelid surgery, and it'll be like, Amanda Bynes gets eyelid surgery. You okay, hun?
Yeah, I know. They do.
Like,
they do write like really funny things like that. All right, so this case that we're going to talk about next is an old case of Casey Anthony, and we'll briefly talk about it because eventually we'll like really get into depth with this case. I think anybody that lives on the planet Earth has heard about this. You want to get into what's going on with this case?
I only want you talking about Casey Anthony in Nancy's voice and referring to her as
Mom.
Top Mom.
Top Mom, Casey Anthony.
Top Mom Casey Anthony murdered her child in 2000. Well, she was accused of murdering her child in 2008, and it's pretty obvious to most people she was guilty, but now she was acquitted ultimately, and nobody's been convicted of this crime. We will get into all the nitty-gritty about it later, but there's all this speculation that her parents were involved and her dad had been molesting her. So now A&E is coming out with a special in a couple of weeks where her parents are going to take a lie detector test in this documentary.
Yeah, and I think that there's mounting evidence that shows that she was somehow involved with this kid dying, but so were her parents. I'm sorry. Like that, that whatever was going on there was like completely weird. How they've been acting afterwards, completely weird, not normal at all. So I mean, the thing is with a polygraph test is that they're not even, I don't even think they hold up in court because they're wrong all the time. And I really think that if you're some kind of a sociopath that you could easily beat those things because don't they base it on your heart rate and everything like that? Like
those things are inadmissible evidence anymore. Same with blood spatter analysis. They don't count. Like you could try to submit them or whatever, but they don't count because exactly what you just said. Certain people with certain personality types are able to beat those things because it is by your heart rate and everything. So people that are like sociopath, whatever the proper terminology is, are able to beat them and get through it.
So what's going to happen? Like, okay, so this is the one of two options. One, it's going to be like, oh, they're clear. They had nothing to do with it. And I'm going to be like, bullshit. Or it's going to say that they had something to do with it, and then I'm going to be like, hell yeah, they did. I'm only going to believe it when it goes my way. But that's how I feel about it. And it's also kind of gross because, like, let's say from their perspective, they've already taken this probably, right? Because this is airing in a couple weeks. So they've probably already taken this. So, like, what if it does say that they really want that information going out there that they were involved?
Listen, you and I both know that it's going to say they're not involved, and they would never have agreed to this unless it was going to be in their favor.
Or they're telling the truth and they know it's going to be in their favor because the truth's on their side, although that's not possible.
This is retaliation because last year Peacock had released a series about Casey Anthony and her side of the truth. And honestly, as somebody that's followed this case pretty much my entire true crime loving life, my perspective changed slightly during that. And we did a whole recap about that last year when it came out. But I'm not saying she was innocent 100%, but I'm feeling a little different about the dad. So,
oh yeah, there's definitely something weird. And listen, I've known this from the beginning because I was a teen mom too, and I lived with my parents too, so I could speak from 100% experience of like what that situation was like, living in a house, like raising your kid with the grandparents still there and everything. And I'm gonna tell you, the biggest red flag is when that kid was missing for one day. Like, if that was our life, my mom would have intervened on day one, and I don't know why it took 30 days for her mom to finally call the cops. So right there, it's like, if you have your grandchild living in the house and the daughter is acting like, maybe you're not scared that the daughter's going to hurt the kid, but the daughter's like just partying and doing this and that, and you're like just scared that the kid's like not in the best loving situation at that time, you're going to be on top of that and try to find that kid and not let some kid that the kid probably lied her whole life, right? Like, mom, she's fine for like 30 days before you call the cops. That didn't pass the smell test for me right away. So
the Peacock series really helped me see that she was a really young woman with a father that was really intimidating, and I think all three involved have some level of guilt.
Yeah, they're all gross people.
And it can't all be pinned on a young person that was intimidated by their parents.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to leave it with.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so moving on to medical news, we have a super weird story.
So this 26-year-old was conceived by IVF, and so was her younger sister, which I believe the sister was 23, right? 3 years younger. So she was saying that she wrote this personal essay that she thought that it was really cool that she was conceived by IVF and that her parents had leftover embryos, and she had been worried about fertility struggles in her own life, so she had briefly considered maybe carrying one of her parents' other embryos.
Yeah, like there just has to be a line drawn right now of like weird shit, and this crosses the line for me.
How long can you keep embryos?
They could stay a long time. I mean, I think I get what the concern is that they're sitting there and you would want to do something with them. And I like how the end of this article says that I don't know if the parents want to start something like this or something like this already exists, that there's like an embryo adoption thing, because IVF could be so expensive for some people. So instead of having to pay for that whole part of the process, it's already done for you if you want to donate the rest of the eggs. But the thing, or the rest of the embryos, but the problem is that like, if you, let's say they have 5 more left over or 2 more left over, whatever, it's like they're their full siblings. And it's just weird to think the whole thing of it is crazy. But I am for this, whatever, just because of, you know, people need help having a baby if they want to have a baby, and that's totally fine. But the whole, like, she wants to carry, she briefly considered carrying.
Now, listen,
it's like, just like,
at the end of the day, she wanted a TikTok viral video, and what her parents plan to do, if they want to plan to adopt the embryos out in some capacity, I think that's a really awesome, admirable thing. But her saying what she said, if she's not actually planning on going through it, was simply so dummies like us end up talking about it on our podcast. So
no, I think that there's people that would 100% would do this. I don't think that it's like I don't think it's a lie necessarily, because I've heard some really weird shit with that. So, but one interesting part of the article that I had never considered, I guess, is that IVF became has been increasingly popular, and I just never thought about like how you would feel if you were conceived via IVF. Like if my mom and pop-up came up to me right now and said, oh, you were an IVF baby and we didn't actually, like, I don't even want to think about this, but, you know, do what you have to do to have, what your parents have to do to have a baby. I would just be like, okay, I don't know, who cares? Like, I don't know.
That, I feel like it's so common today that who cares? But she wrote in this essay that her parents felt really insecure about telling her about it, and her dad, I guess, let it slip one day, and then they had to tell her everything. And then, her and her sister end up thinking it's really cool. And I think it's just so common. If you told me that was the case with me, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, I had no idea.
One thing that is cool, though, that I hadn't even really considered either is that she was saying, like, so when you have IVF, let's say you have 5 embryos there, they're going to pick one first, right? And then you end up being the first born, when really if they picked another one, like your sister would have been the older sister. It's just like, it's like a really weird, that's kind of a weird thing, because I also read a study this week about children and birth order, and like how certain personalities have to do with birth order. And it was just something I never really considered. But as kids get older, like this girl's 26 years old now, and more people have this. This will be a discussion that more people will be having. It's just kind of interesting.
Well, this next story is really interesting, too, about this girl that was in an ultrasound class and ended up discovering her own cancer.
Yeah, so she was a first-year medical student and just playing around with the ultrasound, learning how to do ultrasounds and doing the thyroid, because it's a pretty easy, accessible gland to look at. And they saw a nodule. The teacher was like, okay, it's really common for people to have nodules, which it is, but just why don't you go to the doctor and just get it checked out just in case, because that's what you're supposed to do. And she went, she had blood work done. The blood work was normal. And then she had some kind of problem with her health insurance and didn't go back for almost a year. And then when she went back, it ended up being stage 1 papillary thyroid cancer.
So what is that?
Well, if you were able to go to a hospital and pick a cancer to get, it's one of the better ones to get. If it's confined to the thyroid, there's like 100% chance of survival at 5 years. And even if it spreads to the lymph nodes in the neck, it's still like a super high percentage of survival rate. But it's cancer that, it's actually kind of crazy, because you can get papillary thyroid cancer from exposure to radiation. So like, for example, another high profile death dissection we wrote about in the gross room about Chernobyl, which was, that was like super interesting to research. But those people had just like a super high increase of thyroid cancer that were exposed to radiation. But the weird thing is that to treat thyroid cancer, you will actually give radiation. It's just kind of like an interesting.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, that's it. Well, they give something called radioactive iodine, but that's just like one of the things that I remember from school. It's sometimes things in medicine are just weird like that. But yeah, she'll be fine. Something similar like that happened, not the same, but when I was working in cytology, I used to go on thyroid ultrasounds all the time, and one of the radiologists there was just like, Nicole, your neck looks really big. Let me ultrasound your thyroid. And I was like, okay. And she looked at it and she's like, yeah, you look like you have Hashimoto thyroiditis. It's just like an autoimmune thyroid condition. This was back like when I was 20. And I just thought that was like really cool that she like looked at my neck and thought it looked big and was able to identify that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this woman will be okay, and it's kind of a cool story to tell on her journey as a medical student.
Okay, we gotta get into the other death stories, because this like first one is one of my favorite stories of the week.
Okay, so one of my neighbors next door to me sent me this story that she had seen in her feed on Facebook, and I was automatically like, oh my God, we have to talk about this. But when we looked it up, it ended up being an old story. I don't know how it showed up in her feed, but like, honestly, I never heard it. And I thought, okay, we have to share this with you guys. It was from when, 2018 or something?
Yeah, so this is an honest obituary that went viral, and I'm going to read it for you. You ready?
It's so good.
Kathleen Demlow was born on March 19th, 1938 to Joseph and Gertrude Skunk of Wabasso. She married Dennis at St. Anne's in Wabasso in 1957 and had 2 children, Gina and Jay. Normal so far, right?
This is where it gets juicy.
In 1962, she became pregnant by her husband's brother, Lyle, and moved to California. She abandoned her children, Gina and Jay, who were then raised by her parents and Clements, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Shunk. She passed away on May 31st, 2018 in Springfield and will now face judgment. She will not be missed by Gina and Jay, and they understand that this world is a better place without her.
That's so great.
So the obituary was actually denied by a couple publications at first and removed online from legacy.com
Wow.
and another publication. And the woman that passed away's sister was really disgusted by it, but the kids are like, we don't give a shit. We got the last word in and we feel great about it.
I love that. I think it's awesome. And there's always this thing that when people die that you should be nice, or you should be nice and stuff. And it's like, no, if they were a horrible person, then fuck them. Like, I don't care.
Yeah. People dying doesn't make them angels suddenly.
Exactly.
If they were a bad person, they don't have to be a good person all of a sudden because they're dead. So I thought this was hilarious.
Cheers to these kids.
And you,
I want to give you a handshake.
You better watch it because I'm going to be right. That's what they said.
Okay, here's another story that's local to us, that there was a child wrongfully cremated.
So this girl, when she was just born at 27 weeks and had cerebral palsy, and then as a teenager, her mother went to go wake her up one day, or her brother went to go wake her up one day, and she was cold to touch. So she ended up being deceased, and because she was a young person, that Emmy and investigators had to get involved to rule out no foul play. So basically, she was brought to the Philadelphia medical examiner's office, and for 41 days, the parents weren't getting any communication. They were trying to retrieve the body for burial, and it turns out that against their wishes, she had been cremated.
All right, so I'm trying to figure out what happened here because I know a little bit about their procedures. When the mom found and the brother found the daughter dead, they called 911. I'm assuming they called 911. Or they called because who else would they call? They wouldn't call the medical examiner.
They'd have to call 911.
All right, so they call 911. The police come, the ambulance come, they pronounce this kid dead. And they said, okay, we're going to do an autopsy because she's 16 and this and that. And they bring the body to the medical examiner. Now, when the body goes to the medical examiner's office, that body, especially because it was being picked up in the child's home, has a name on it, a date of birth and all that stuff. They bring the body to the medical examiner's office, and the medical examiner, especially because this child has a history of health problems, the next step should have been that they called the child's physician and said, hey, we have this girl, she died. Do you think we need to do an autopsy? Is there a reason that she could have died? The mom gave them the pediatrician's phone number along with the neurologist's phone number that was taking care of the child. So they were supposed to call them to say, like, because, like, you don't really want to do an autopsy if you don't have to, and there was no suspicious reason surrounding the death. And for some reason, the paperwork got screwed up, because that's what happened in this case, that they thought that the child was listed as a Jane Doe and nobody knew who the kid was. And that's why they ended up cremating the kid, because they thought that there was nobody claiming this kid. I mean, I just look at it as, like, I feel terrible for the mom, and I'm glad that she's looking into it, because it's sloppy in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge mess. You can't just do that.
Yeah, and to me, it's just like, I just don't even understand how they would accidentally list her as a Jane Doe when the mom was there the entire time. And the mom said she called multiple times, and the kid's dad was calling multiple times to be like, hey, what did the autopsy show? Can we release the body? Like, and they were saying she's listed as a Jane Doe, and the mom's like, I gave them, they know I'm her mom. I mean, the mom seems like she was taking care of the kid, bringing her to appointments and everything. And, like, how could something like this happen? Especially, like, she didn't give consent for the kid to get cremated. And even if she sues them and she wins and everything, you can't ever get that back. And a lot of times people have especially really strong, like, religious beliefs as to how they want things to be carried on after death. And you have to respect that.
Yeah, and the family's not going to get the proper closure that they wanted. It's all around a horrible situation.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, instead, I mean, think about this. Like, you have a baby premature, the baby's had problems their whole life. They cerebral palsy their entire life, and dies kind of unexpectedly, suddenly at 16 years old. How horrible that must be, mourning from that, and then to just have to deal with some bullshit of like you calling them and them kind of telling you like, oh, well, we ever listed as a Jane Doe. Well, that's your fault. That's not my fault. So don't make
Yeah,
me
that's
feel like
not
shit
really-
about that.
Yeah, like that's 100% not acceptable at all.
Yeah, no. Okay, last case. Again, I feel like we just talked about this last week, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about so last week we were talking about a mom who had a stillbirth, and not that we agree with this, but for whatever reason decided with the remains of the stillbirth she was going to put it on a barbecue grill and incinerate it. She's getting charged with abuse of a corpse, even though it seems like all investigations show that she had a miscarriage. This next case, same exact thing is happening again. This time it's in Ohio. 33-year-old woman started having a miscarriage and had a stillborn at home around 22 weeks in the toilet. And I guess she freaked out and started trying to flush the toilet. And of course the fetus at 22 weeks is big, and it got stuck in the toilet. And now she's getting charged with like abuse of a corpse and stuff. And I'm just like, I just don't think it's right. I think it's messed up. So what? So if she went to the hospital and they threw it in a biohazard bag, that wouldn't be abuse of a corpse? Like, it's so ridiculous to me.
This forensic pathologist is really fighting for her and saying that the baby was non-viable.
Exactly.
Like, no matter what, the baby had died before it even expelled from her body. So, like, why is she getting charged? It's felony corpse abuse.
I know, and it's like...
And now it's going to a grand jury, which you don't know what wackadoos are going to be on that jury. So this is such a divisive topic with people.
I know, but it's just like, think, like, you look at this lady in the picture, and it's just like I'm sure she's not going through some trauma because she just had a miscarriage at 22 weeks of pregnancy. She was going to the doctor. She had appointments before this, right? She didn't do this on purpose. She had this miscarriage, and like, maybe she was grieving so much that she didn't want to go to the hospital. Maybe she doesn't have insurance or something, and she thought like, I'm not going to the hospital because I'm going to get a $20,000 bill if I go to the hospital, and this kid's out and I'm not pregnant anymore. Whatever the case.
I just feel like there's like this level of shock when this happens to people.
Yeah.
Like maybe she flushed the toilet by accident. Like, you don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, maybe she didn't expect it was going to be that big and didn't, like, what else do you do with it? I don't know. But I just think that abuse of a corpse is like, I mean, listen, the damage is done. This is already on her record forever that she was at least accused of abusing a corpse. I mean, it's really messed up. It's messed up.
No, it's horrible and it's not right.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like these types of stories I keep seeing more frequently, and it just really is upsetting to be a woman in this country right now. If this is what it's going to be like, Jesus.
Well, it's a big thing is, I personally would say if any person was ever having a miscarriage at home, whether you're 5 weeks or 20 weeks, whatever, I personally think that you should go to the hospital, just because I know that there's times that it all doesn't come out. And that's what we do in pathology. Actually, we look at what's called the products of conception to make sure all the placental tissue came out, and to make sure that there was like all the fetal parts came out, and that there wasn't some other thing going on. Because sometimes you can get a molar pregnancy, which can sometimes be like a cancerous thing. So it's always safer to just get it checked out. But like, again, I'm saying, if you're in a situation where you don't want to take on that bill because you don't have I mean, they'll treat you if you go to the hospital, but they'll send you a bill too. So I almost don't blame a person that they might just be like, you know what? It hurt really bad. It came out. I'm not bleeding anymore. I'm good. I saw the baby. It's like, I'm not pregnant anymore. Whatever, right? Like, you could see how a person would think that way. And I don't think they should have criminal charges against them.
No, it's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, on to our questions of the day. Every Friday on the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram, we post a little story with a question box. You guys could ask us whatever questions you want. Then we'll try to answer as many as we can. This episode's running a little long, so we had to narrow it down to 2 for today. But first is, if I join the Gross Room today, A, is it until the end of the year or for 1 year? And can I see all the older posts?
So you can join the Gross Room as a monthly member, or you could join as a yearly member. Some people like to join as a monthly member just to check it out, but like most people end up upgrading anyway because it's so much fun in there and awesome and learning so much. But you could also do a yearly. So tomorrow, actually, we have specials once in a while, a couple times a year, and we're going to do it for a couple, what is it, like 5 days or?
Yeah, so from December 15th, which is tomorrow, until December the 20th, we are going to have a sale that's $20 for 1 year membership. So
yeah, that's obviously like worth it, because I think the monthly membership is like $5.99. So,
and it's not till the end of this year. It's like 1 year from the day you sign up.
And it's a leap year, so you actually get an extra day, right? 360.
Yeah, bonus day.
Yeah.
And it's our last sale of the year. There won't be one for a while, so this is definitely the time.
Yes, it is. And also, so I started the Gross Room in November of 2019, and there are over 2,000 articles and posts in the Gross Room. So we have thousands of photos, videos, articles, and if you sign up for it, yeah, you would be busy for weeks on end, just like catching up with old stuff, because there's just so much to look at. And some of the articles are, especially like the celebrity death dissections and high profile death dissections, they're really long. They take a while to read. And also there is an audio portion too. So we started recording like 2 years ago?
Yeah, so there's about 50 additional podcast episodes in there, and then we've started recording the high profile and celebrity death dissections as an additional accessibility feature. So if people can't read, or like they don't want to, if they're driving and just want to listen to it really quick, they definitely can, and it makes it easy.
Yeah, so I think that, and also, you know, we narrate the celebrity death dissections and high profile dissections. So right now, I believe there's like over 100 of those, right? There has to be different celebrities, like covered every single celebrity death. And there's a section you could just go right in the Gross Room and look and at the whole entire list of celebrities and just like get right into it. But we pretty much, especially since the Gross Room's been going, anytime there's like a high profile death, like Bob Saget was a big one, and Matthew Perry is coming when we get more information from the autopsy. So you'll love it. It's just, if you like this podcast, you'll love the Gross Room.
All right, and then the last question is, having me so young, did you take me to school with you?
So school. So I went to high school. I got pregnant with you in 9th grade. I took off from school when I was the rest of my pregnancy, and then until she was a couple months old. And then I went to 10th grade, and then I finished 10th grade. Well, no, I didn't finish 10th grade. I went to 10th grade for a couple months. Did I finish? I might have finished.
Well, I was born in December.
And I was, so I was 15, and then, yeah, so that's what happened. So in 10th grade, I started in February of 10th grade, like after the winter break and stuff. I went back, and I went for a couple months, and then I decided that I wanted to go to hair school, actually, to like cosmetology school. So I asked my parents if I could drop out and go to, if I could see, because if I had my GED, I could go to cosmetology school when I was 16. And so I dropped out of high school that year. And then I took my GED the next day, and then I started hair school that August, which was like right when I turned 16 years old. And So to answer your question, no, I didn't bring her to high school with me. We had a really awesome woman that like came from God, I swear. She one day, like, obviously because my mom was like still working and she was a young grandmom, and we had this, my mom was at work like crying one day because she didn't know what we were going to do with Maria when I had to go back to school. And especially because like daycare wasn't common back then, when, and we didn't know about it. We never used it, when like my mom never used it with us and stuff. And my mom was at work one day and she was crying about it, and one of her coworkers was like, my mom watches kids. And we went and met this woman, Joan and Joe, and Maria went to them until you were probably way too old to have a babysitter. We loved them. They were like adoptive grandparents. Just loved them.
Truly the best people ever.
And like, just like really like part of my journey, because they loved Maria so much, and like took her to parks every day and the movies, and home cooked her food for lunch and everything. And they barely charged me any money. And they were the reason that I was able to like go back to college and graduate college twice, and just have my crazy schedule and work full time and go to school full time, because I was constantly like leaning on them a lot. And they were awesome, just awesome people. So I didn't have to bring her to school with me. But then once I went to college, and because when I went to college the 1 year to Jefferson, when I moved to Philly for that year to make it easier on myself, which made it completely harder on myself because I was like a single mom in the city. But yeah, when I was going to Jefferson, I brought her to school with me a lot, because at that time, what were you, 7, 8?
I was in second grade when we lived in Philly.
So you were like 7 or 8-ish? And
yeah, I remember going, you started off going to Camden County.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly going there a couple of times with you. And then I did go to Jefferson with you. When you were in grad school, I never went. Well, I was old. I was like 14.
You were like 14 then, yeah. But yeah, Jefferson, I mean, it just was a different situation because I was in school for cytology, and there was, I think my program started with 4 people, and then like the one guy got a residency and dropped out. The other guy, I think, also got a residency and dropped out because they were doctors from another country, and they were just kind of like, well, I guess I'll be a cytotech, and then unless some pathology residency gives me a call and says, hey, I could go be a doctor here. So they left, and then it was only me and Shayna. So it was me and Shayna, and we had a teacher, and she was just like cool with me sticking Maria. I would give Maria in the back and give her all her books and her homework and be like, yo, like sit back here for an hour or two and color and do your homework and like be quiet, and I got to finish class.
Yeah. So I kind of have a bachelor's of science.
I know,
too.
right? You should have got like an honorary bachelor's degree.
But all right. Well, thank you guys so much. Always fun questions to answer. Don't forget to leave your questions every Friday on the @MotherKnowsDeath Instagram account.
All right. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.